December 28th, 1964, Garfield Heights, Ohio. A popular and beautiful 16-year-old girl with a bright future is home alone during her winter break, waiting for a friend. But before her bestie arrived, Beverly was brutally attacked in her own bedroom, strangled and stabbed 42 times, her killer leaving behind almost no evidence, while vanishing without a trace. All that was left was a grieving family, friends, and traumatized police detectives who worked the case. And almost 61 years later, this case remains unsolved. The victim's family is still waiting for answers and justice, and some amateur true crime sleuths think they might be on the trail of something. This is the story of Beverly Jarosz, obsession, terror, and a murder people refuse to forget. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for all of our friends down there in Brazil.
In Brazil?
Yep. Bem-vindo.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I wonder what Brazil is like this time of year, because right now it's hotter than the hinges of Hades outside where we are.
I think it's hotter than the hinges of Hades most of the time in Brazil.
Wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who like true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. We're growing by leaps and bounds. If you're new,
yes,
welcome. We're so glad you're there. All you have to do is go to Facebook and type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you're in. So go join.
Nice.
I post photos and other information in there as well. It's a great group of true crime folks. We love them so much.
Yep.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. We also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. I'll take a Diet Mountain Dew if you are so inclined. You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text.
Come on, talk to us.
This case is almost 61 years old, and professionals and amateurs alike are still trying to solve this murder.
Really?
It's really interesting. There's a little twist at the end, so you got to wait till the very end of the podcast to hear some of the stuff that's going on.
It's like a movie.
You know what? This could be a movie. It really, really could.
Really?
Before I get started, let me thank some sources. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Cleveland Press, the Akron Beacon Journal, the Ironton Tribune, Reddit. There's a ton on Reddit, not Rebbit. There's a ton on Reddit. Morbidology.com, the Ohio Attorney General.gov, WEWS News 5 in Cleveland.
WEWS.
The Claremont Sun, Find a Grave, Dateline NBC, Eye on Justice, and the Beverly Ann Jarosz Faith and Forgiveness YouTube channel. I have links for all of those in the show notes if you want to go dig and go down the rabbit hole, because this really is a big old rabbit hole.
All right. Well, in spite of my radio ID, WEW. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
Beverly Jarosz was born on October 1st, 1948 in Garfield Heights, Cuyahoga County, Ohio. It's a suburb outside of Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Her parents are Thaddeus, he goes by Ted, and Eleanor Vanek Jarosz.
Thaddeus, that had to be a family name.
Thaddeus?
Mm-hmm.
I have a great Thaddeus story. I even put it in a book one time. I had a cousin who ran home and said, "Mom, I met this little boy. His name is Fat Ass." And my aunt was like, that's not his name. It can't be his name. And he was like, yeah, everybody calls him Fat Ass. His name was Thaddeus.
Oh, my God.
It was such a great story. I put it in a book.
That's very unfortunate for that kid.
But this Thaddeus goes by Ted.
Okay.
And Ted is a Navy man during World War II, just like your dad.
Mm-hmm.
When he's back in Garfield Heights, he opens Universal Lighting and Manufacturing Company. They would have a second daughter, Carol, 4 years after Beverly is born. And when the girls are older, Eleanor goes to work as a secretary at a company called Gellin Company. They live in a little house, a 1.5-story bungalow on Thornton Drive. Eleanor's mother, Beverly's grandmother, lived nearby. So it's a really close-knit community, and all these little houses kind of look alike, and everybody knows everybody.
Right.
Beverly was a precocious little girl. She was very smart. She was beautiful, inquisitive. She had brown hair, big blue eyes. She had a love for the arts and classical music. She loved poetry. She loved art. She's a Renaissance girl.
Right, yeah.
And by the time 1964 rolls around, Beverly has just turned 16 in October, and she's a student at a Roman Catholic high school, Marymount High School. Now, by the time Beverly is in high school, she's turning heads. She's gorgeous. Silky brunette hair, big blue eyes, like I said. Her mother described her brown hair as, quote, looking like the sun was shining on it. So very, very silky and shiny.
Seemed like every class had that one girl.
The it girl?
The it girl.
That was smart and beautiful and kind, and that's Beverly for sure.
Ours was Diane Tenery.
There you go, Diane. You go, Diane.
And give her a shout out here.
Wasn't she your prom date?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good Lord. She was way above my pay grade.
But the boys and the men around Beverly are very enamored by her beauty and her grace. She did volunteer work at the Marymount Hospital. She loved Shakespeare. She even quoted it when she was a little girl. She was a member of the Press World Friends Club and had a pen pal in England. Did you ever have a pen pal?
No.
I had one in high school. He was from Japan.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. I didn't know how to write, so.
He was getting ready. I took German. I was supposed to get a German pen pal so I could write in German, and my pen pal in Germany could practice English so we could practice the language. And somehow I got a guy in Japan who spoke and wrote perfect English.
Really?
So I never had to do anything.
Yeah.
But he was sitting for his exams. Like they get, it's very stressful.
Sure.
And he was sitting for these exams. And then after that, I never heard from him again.
Really?
Yeah, I hope he's okay.
What would you say to him to make him?
I didn't say anything. He was just getting ready to sit for these exams.
Okay.
It wasn't me.
I believe you.
But she had a pen pal in England. She was also a part of the Future Teachers Association. She wanted to grow up and teach Latin, of all things. Latin.
Wow, that's random.
Well, she loves Shakespeare. She loves Latin and poetry and art. That's just who she is.
Makes sense.
As 1964 came to a close, Beatlemania was in full swing. The United States was escalating its involvement in the war in Vietnam. The U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964 had been enacted. The Nobel Peace Prize was given to Martin Luther King Jr., and the very first Ford Mustang came off the assembly line.
Oh, yeah, baby.
In Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns had won the NFL championship. It's not yet the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. It will be the next year.
Cleveland still have an NFL team? Just kidding. I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan.
Said like a Bengals fan for sure.
I'm allowed to say that.
The dog pound is going to come after you.
That's all right. I don't even apologize for that.
In suburban Garfield Heights, outside of Cleveland, 16-year-old Beverly Jarosz is ready for 1965 because 1964 in some ways had been a little bit odd for her. During the summer and fall, somebody was calling Beverly's house constantly, sometimes 10 and 12 times a day.
Whoa.
And they would always just hang up, especially if Beverly didn't answer. And they actually had a party line. I read that they had a party line. Didn't you have a party line growing up?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sure did.
So maybe explain to people what that is, because young folks have no idea.
Yeah, party line, in the old days, you had a telephone that was on the wall or on a stand or whatever. and a lot of times to share the cost so it wasn't so expensive, people would be on the same phone line that you were on. So you could pick up the phone at any given time and Aunt Josephine might be talking to Betty over on the other side of the, And so you'd have to wait until they were done. So when you were on the phone, you would always hear click, click. And that was people picking up the phone to see if they could use it. So that was a party line. It was crazy.
Or you could just pick up and listen to anybody's conversation.
Yeah. I don't remember it that well because I was pretty little at the time, but I do remember that we had a party line. So.
I thought of you when I saw that in my research. But they would call and then just hang up. And then anonymous gifts began to appear at the back door of their home. Now, this house had a front door, a side door by the driveway, and then a back door. And the family never used this back door. I think like their dinette table kind of backed up to it. It would have been inconvenient for them to come in and out of this back door.
Gotcha.
But the gifts were left at the back door, and they included a silver bracelet and a ring. Once some costume jewelry was left for her in the family's mailbox on the front of the house, not the kind of mailbox that's on the street, but the one that's, like attached to the front of the house where the mailman actually walks from house to house.
It's got a little lid on it.
Yeah. And a note was attached to the back door gifts that simply said, quote, "For Bev," end quote. And one time when she was at the Cleveland Museum of Art, she was followed by an angry-looking, tall, thin man. This according to Beverly and a security guard there. So she's this gorgeous girl, right? And she's turning heads. She's turning some of the wrong heads. Now, because of all of this, Beverly felt like she was being stalked. She was a little skittish about being alone, and she would always lock the doors at her parents' home, both the storm doors and the wooden doors. You don't see storm doors very much. We grew up having them, too.
Yeah, we had a storm door.
I think it's because, I can remember when we got central air conditioning in our house when I was a little kid. And I think, the storm doors had screens and it would let the air into the house.
We had one that it was called a breezeway. It was in between the garage and the house. And it had a roof on it, but it was a breezeway, so it was open. I just remember that storm door getting ripped off every so often.
By the wind?
By the wind. My dad was like, "You got to watch that storm door."
And then somebody doesn't close it and boom, it's gone.
It's gone again.
Yeah. So she would lock the storm doors and the actual door, the wooden door. She also bought herself a letter opener that she kept with her when she was alone. Now, I have one that looks like this. It looks like a knife, like very stabby with a pointy end.
That's why I don't argue with my wife.
She was going to stab somebody if they got too close.
Gotcha.
But even with all the unwanted attention, Beverly still dated. There was her ex, Daniel Schulte, 19 years old, known as a, quote, bad boy ex, and a, quote, greaser, end quote.
Okay.
He was also in the military. There was John Palion. There are a lot of Slavic names, possibly Polish names in here. I'm going to do my best, okay?
All right.
He was a neighbor who lived 2 houses down. He would spy on Beverly when she sunbathed in the backyard.
Oh, man.
People, including Beverly, thought he was creepy.
You think?
Yeah, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
And there was Bruce Bellick. He was a 21-year-old college student. Beverly once wrote to a friend that Bruce had come over to her house to see what she looked like without clothes.
What?
So is Bruce a peeping Tom?
Gee whiz.
But get this, Bruce also sometimes gave Beverly and her sister Carol a ride home from church.
Well, there's...
So he believes in Jesus, but he wants to see her naked at the same time.
Oh, man. Okay.
But in 1964, she was dating her best friend, Margie Gorney's cousin. His name was Roger McNamara. He was 18 years old and a college student. He was really straight-laced, very conservative, and he and Beverly had been dating about 7 months.
Okay.
Now, it's Christmas 1964, and among the gifts that Beverly received, one was a sweater she was going to exchange, and the other was a leather journal for her to write her poetry in. She loved to write poetry, and her dad actually got her this leather-bound books, her leather journal, so she could write some of her original poetry in it.
I have a lot of leather-bound books and rich mahogany.
There you go. So you see, Beverly's quite the writer. She writes poetry. She has a diary that she writes in every single day. But this was specifically for her just to write poems in. But she does have a diary.
Okay.
On December 27th, her parents had a party in their home, and Roger was there with Beverly. These two slip out of the party and go for a drive. And actually, they were supposed to attend Beverly's winter formal at her high school, at Marymount High School, on December 30th during the winter break. But that night, when he says goodnight to Beverly at her parents' party, that's the last time Roger would see his little girlfriend alive. The next morning, on Monday, December 28th, the Jarosz family has breakfast together. Can you imagine? Did you ever sit down at the table and have breakfast with your family, like on a regular basis before you go to school, before you went to school?
No, usually everybody was running around like the chickens with
Everybody
their heads
was going in their own direction, right?
Grabbing Cheerios, flying all over.
Yeah, I was going to say by the time, that's about the time cereal sort of came into play. And I can remember eating a bowl of cereal and like rushing out the door or whatever. But they would sit and have breakfast together.
Wow.
And later, Eleanor, Beverly's mother, will say she had a terrible feeling that morning. She just had a bad feeling about the day. But still, Ted and Eleanor both leave for work, and Beverly and her little sister, 12-year-old Carol, they have plans. They were going to see their grandmother, Maria Vanek, on Dorothy Avenue.
Okay.
Now, each week, Beverly would wash and set her grandmother's hair, which I thought was so sweet.
Yeah.
She would wash and set her grandmother's hair in rollers. And while they were on this winter break, both Beverly and Carol were heading there. So Beverly called her grandmother around 10 a.m., who asked if she and Carol could stop at Woolworth's and buy a hairnet.
I used to love Woolworths. Actually, my first electric guitar came from Woolworths.
There you go.
Yep, sure did.
I don't know that I remember Woolworths.
No.
It's a little bit before my time, but I know they were still around, but I just don't remember it.
Yep.
But she wants him to stop and get a hairnet and then go to Hoff's Bakery to get a fresh loaf of bread. Now, this I do kind of remember. We would have bread delivered to the house. We would have milk delivered to the house. The Charlie's Chip Man came to the house and delivered potato chips. We had potato chips delivered to the house.
Wow.
That's like the OG DoorDash, if you really think about it.
We just had to go out and milk the cow.
You did not.
Just kidding.
But they're stopping at Hoff's Bakery to get a fresh loaf of bread. And Carol, her younger sister, will remember laying the keys to their house on top of her purse while they were out shopping and then turning around and seeing that the keys were gone. But these same keys will be found later in a coat pocket. They leave the house around 10:30 a.m., and their neighbor, Julia Prochaska, who was sad because of the death of her canary, this was in the newspaper, she was looking out the window of her home. She's sad over her canary. She's gazing out her window, and she sees Beverly and Carol leaving their house.
It was a slow news day.
Well, it's really important for the timeline. And she even says that that's what time she saw these two girls leave the house. And she remembered because she was so sad over her canary.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Beverly is wearing pants, a white shirt, a black cardigan, and a gray wool coat. They run the errands and walk to their grandmother's home. It's only about 1.5 miles, so it's not like they're walking uphill both ways in the snow kind of thing.
Right.
But there was a bus, and there's some conflicting information about whether or not they caught a bus or whether they walked. But it doesn't really matter. They head to their grandmother's house.
Sure.
And when they arrive, Beverly calls her friend Barbara Klanowski from her grandmother's house, and they make plans to meet up between 1 and 1:30, and then they were going to her other bestie, her house, Margie Gorney, between 1:30 and 2. And Margie lived near Beverly on Raymond Avenue. So everybody sort of lives in this same area.
And you know, what's interesting, and this is kind of off the beaten path here, hearing all these names, this obviously this community is a lot of Polish descent. And in my area, it was a lot of German descent.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how people landed in certain parts of the country from other areas of the world.
And then and stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what made me think of that.
There are a lot of names. I'm going to do my best. If I screw up somebody's last name, I apologize in advance.
All right, proceed.
At noon that day, Beverly, her sister Carol, and their grandmother had ham sandwiches for lunch, and they discussed the upcoming new year. At 12:15, Beverly hugs her grandmother and kisses her goodbye, and 12-year-old Carol stays behind because Beverly's got plans with her girlfriends.
Right.
And she doesn't say goodbye to her little sister because Carol was in the kitchen rinsing off the lunch dishes. Carol never gets to say goodbye to her older sister, Beverly.
Wow.
Now, Beverly goes to the street corner to catch the city bus back home, but her grandmother's neighbor on Dorothy Avenue had an 18-year-old son. His name was James Mondenzaleski. I'm sorry, James.
Close enough. Close enough for jazz.
And James's mother asked him to take Beverly home. So again, close-knit community.
Sure.
She's standing at the bus stop. Her grandmother's next door neighbor sees her standing at the bus stop, and she tells her 18-year-old son, James, take Beverly home.
Yeah.
And he was just coming back from a job interview, so he quickly changed his clothes, and then he drove Beverly home. She said thank you and went into the house through the glass storm door and the door on the side of the house that's between the living room and the kitchen. So not through the front door, through the side door by the driveway.
Okay.
And James waits for her to go in and shut the door. He's a gentleman. He makes sure she gets home okay, gets in the door okay. And he sees nothing unusual, and he backs out of the driveway and goes home to have lunch.
Okay.
Now, Beverly comes into the house. She puts her purse down by her Heritage of Music book. It's a textbook. And then hangs her gray coat on the banister at the bottom of the stairs. I can see this going on because this is exactly what our kids used to do. Dump your stuff in the kitchen, hang your winter coat at the bottom of the stairs.
Yep.
She turns on the radio. Our kids did this as well, but she turns on classical music on WCLV.
WCLV.
In Cleveland. You missed it. You didn't go all the way that time.
Oh, I'm pacing myself, sir.
Okay. At 12:30, the phone rings at the Jarosz home, and Beverly answers. It's the local jeweler telling her that the necklace that belonged to her grandmother couldn't be fixed. They had taken in this necklace. And I don't know what was wrong with it. It didn't really say, but it just could not be fixed.
Well, and immediately I go back to, okay, the kid that dropped her off, now he's in the clear.
He is in the clear.
Yeah.
Yes, he is in the clear.
Because of this phone call.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He is in the clear. But again, he's very important to the timeline because there's a really small window that this murder happens in.
All right.
At 12:45, Beverly calls her mother, who's at work, but she's on her lunch break. And she calls to tell her mom that the jeweler has said that the necklace can't be fixed. And her mother can hear the classical music from the radio playing softly in the background. And these two say goodbye. And after Beverly tells her mom of her plans to hang out with Barbara at Margie's house, but her mother, Eleanor's lunch break was over, and she says, I gotta go. Goodbye. It's almost 1 p.m.
Okay.
Then the phone rings again. I was like, these people are on the phone. This party line was really occupied by the Jarosz family.
Yeah.
But the phone rings again. It's 1:15 p.m. Beverly answers, and a man asks for her father, asks for Ted. And she says he's not home, and I'll take a message. And he tells her his name is Stephen Stekowitz. and he will call later. My name's Steven Stakowitz. I'll just call back later. And Beverly actually writes this down on a piece of paper, and she leaves it by the phone. Okay. Steven Stakowitz. Right. And Stakowitz is a common name in that area, so it probably didn't seem odd to her.
Right.
At 1:30, Beverly's grandmother calls to check in on her. After the stalking and the jewelry, her family would check in on her just to make sure that she had made it to her destination. And she would always call and let somebody know where she was when she was leaving and when she would arrive, which makes sense. We used to do that a lot before cell phones.
Sure.
But in this phone call, Beverly tells her grandma that she has to run. She's in a hurry because she's got to get ready to meet Barbara and Margie. And her grandmother will later say that she thinks as Beverly was hanging up, she said, quote, "I can't talk to you now, Grandma. Barbara is here," end quote. Mm. At 1:25, Barbara Klanowski's mom drives up to Beverly's door, and Barbara's mom is in a hurry. She's late for something, so she doesn't wait to see if Beverly opens the door for her daughter. She just drives off thinking it's no big deal, right?
Sure.
And Barbara sees that the screen door on the side of the house is locked, and she can hear the music inside the house, and it's really loud. So she knocks on the door. No Beverly. She goes to the front door. She knocks there. No Beverly. She sees the mail has been delivered in the mailbox on the front of the house, and she pulls out a magazine. She's thinking she's in the bathroom. She can't hear me knocking. Right. Something's going on. So she gets this magazine out. She sits on the front stoop and just starts reading it, thinking Beverly's going to eventually realize that I'm here, right?
Yeah.
And when Beverly doesn't come to let her in, she finally stands under Beverly's window and shouts up at her. And this is when she hears a loud thump, like a dresser or something has been knocked over. And she thinks Beverly is playing a prank on her. Or she thinks that maybe Beverly isn't answering the door because she's mad at her because she got there later than she was supposed to. Then she's thinking maybe she just went on to Margie's house without me. So she puts the magazine back into the mailbox and she walks toward Turney Road. Now, at 1:45, between 1:45 and 2 p.m., Barbara walks in the direction of her own home. She decides not to walk to Margie's house, where the three of them were supposed to spend the day together. But when she makes it to the intersection of Turney and Granger Roads, a friend, his name is Gary Grayson, he sees her. He's at the gas station that sits at that intersection, and he offers to take her home in his 1958 Chevy Corvair.
There you go.
He takes her straight home, and she arrives at 2 p.m. Now, when Barbara gets home, she calls Beverly's house over and over and over, but nobody's answering. Meanwhile, Margie is at her house wondering, why haven't these two girls shown up? I mean, where are Barbara and Beverly?
Sure.
So she calls Barbara when she can't get Beverly to answer the phone and says, why didn't you guys come over?
Yeah.
And Barbara tells her that she believed Beverly was mad at her for running so late and wouldn't come to the door. And she tells her she knows she's home because the door was open, but the storm door was locked and the music was so loud in the house. And Margie thinks this is odd because it's not like Beverly to act this way.
Right.
So when she hangs up with Barbara, Margie calls Beverly's grandmother. Now, Margie's a little bit closer to the family than Barbara. And actually, the reason Barbara came over to Beverly's house was because Beverly and Barbara were close and Beverly and Margie were close. But Barbara and Margie weren't great friends. Not like, I'm just going to show up at your house.
Right.
So she's kind of like the go-between between these two girls.
Okay.
But Margie actually calls Beverly's grandmother, Mrs. Vanek, because nobody's answering the phone at Bev's house. And this is when they begin to worry. According to little Carol, her grandmother knew immediately that something was wrong. At 3:30, when Mrs. Vanek hears that Beverly was playing loud music with the door open, Mrs. Vanek tells Margie, quote, "Oh my God, she's dead," end quote.
Oh, wow.
She assumes the worst because she spoke with her and she knew Beverly was rushing to meet up with friends. Remember? She remembers her saying, Barbara's here. I got to go.
Yeah, I can't talk right now. Yeah.
So she hangs up and calls Beverly's father, Ted, who's at work. And when he hears what his mother-in-law has told him, he gets in the car and he rushes home. It's now nearly 4 o'clock. He arrives at home about 4:15, 4:20-ish. And when he gets there, he too can hear the music from inside the house. And he immediately sees that the side door is open. But this time, the storm door is unlocked. And when he gets inside the house, he sees that the back door and its storm door, they are also unlocked and open. And this door is never opened. Again, I think it kind of sits against the dinette table.
Right.
So he sees that the front door is locked. There's no forced entry. Nothing seemed amiss on the first floor, with the exception of the radio playing so loud. He went upstairs to the girl's bedroom, and this is where he finds Beverly on the floor, face down in a pool of blood. The room was dark, and she's lying in between two twin beds. She and Carol shared a bedroom. And she's lying in between the two beds, and her left leg is hooked up against her bed frame. He can see that she's dead. He doesn't touch anything, only puts his hand on her lower back to see if she is warm or cold. And she's cold.
Jeez.
He rushed downstairs to call the police. Then he called his mother-in-law back, and all he could do was yell the word murder, murder, murder.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Carol is shuffled off to her grandmother's neighbor, and her grandmother went to the house, gets in her car and drives to the house. Beverly is lying partially on top of a blood-soaked blanket that she kept at the foot of her bed. Her clothes were only partially on. Her body is exposed. Her shirt, the buttons are like ripped from it and lifted, and her bra is sort of cut open and shoved up, and her pants have been pulled down, leaving her partially nude. Now, 3 lengths of rope were found, one in her hand, one around her neck, and one around her feet. It was a sash cord that had been used as clothesline, and she had 9 stab wounds in her back from her neck to her waist. And it looked like the killer had accidentally cut the rope while stabbing her. He ends up stabbing her in like groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But he stabs her, or she stabs her, 42 times.
Wow.
Her neck, her face, chest, and back. She had 12 stab wounds to her hands alone, defensive wounds.
Sure.
And the knife they assumed was about 3 to 5 inches and very sharp. Every single stab wound was about 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches deep. 9 of the stab wounds were in her back, again in sets of 3. Her face was slashed on the left side from her ear to her chin, and on the right side from her ear to the base of her throat.
Wow.
The coroner would report that the killer, quote, severed all the vessels, end quote. But she's got this rope around her, this cord around her neck. She was also strangled. Now, there's no evidence of DNA under her fingernails, and her stomach only contained the lunch that she shared with her grandmother.
Okay.
There was a throw rug between the 2 beds, and it was found under Carol's bed. There was another throw rug in the room, and it had drops of blood on it and was all wadded up and moved across the room, sort of shoved across the room. Her bed sheets and mattress were blood-soaked, and she'd kicked a 9x5 hole through the sloping wall. Yeah. So let me explain to you, this room is it's sort of like the attic room that they've turned into a bedroom. And it's kind of big. It's got like a little sitting area and a desk, and they've got a little TV that's on a cart that's got wheels. And then as the roof slopes up, there's a bed, in between the twin beds, and then there's another bed. So their beds are right against those sloped angles. And if you've got a bonus room over the garage, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that's what it was like. And on her side of the room, she had kicked a 9x5 hole through this wall. It was plaster, so she kicked through this plaster wall. There was also blood spatter all over the walls. There was cast off from the knife everywhere. The nightstand between the 2 beds was untouched, and so was Carol's bed on the other side of the room. There were 12 fingerprints and some bloody palm prints, and all but 3 were eliminated as hers or her mom, dad, or Carol's, her little sisters. And Beverly's diary was missing. Oh. It was the only thing taken from the house.
Wow.
Now, the local Garfield Heights police described it as one of the most horrifying scenes they had ever witnessed, and they called the Cleveland police for help. And the investigation began, and the lead investigator, Captain William Horrigan, just days after the murder, employs a German Shepherd police dog. And the dog followed a scent from Beverly's bedroom out the back door near the dinette table and across the backyard. And then the dog goes into the backyard of a neighbor behind the Jarosz' property. And the dog ended on the next street over, north of the house on McCracken Road, where footprints were found in a patch of sand by the curb.
Okay.
And that's where the trail ended.
Really?
And they're thinking maybe he left by car, which was sitting there.
Yeah.
Now, when police search the house and the yard for clues, they find a clump of Beverly's hair in a bush in the backyard of the home. And as for the clothesline, well, a neighbor used the same type of rope for tying bushes, but the exact source will never be found. The medical examiner will say that Beverly died from asphyxiation due to strangulation by rope, and the time of death was around 1:30 p.m. based on the level of digestion in her stomach. So when she thinks somebody's at the door and she's telling her grandmother, her killer was at the door.
Oh, wow.
The murder weapon is never recovered, but Beverly used to keep a letter opener with her for protection, remember? But
Sure.
It was not the murder weapon. They decided that wasn't the murder weapon.
That would have been a lot longer.
Over 1,000 people showed up for Beverly's funeral at St. Teresa Church. Her family is numb and devastated.
I'm sure.
She's 16. She was gorgeous. She was loved by everyone. She had the world ahead of her, a whole life ahead of her.
Yeah.
Now, the Garfield Heights police try to be as thorough as they can. I do want to stop and say I did read that Beverly was a virgin and she had not been raped in this attack. She had been stabbed, her clothes had been pulled off or pulled down, but they found no evidence of rape. But because that her clothes were pulled from her body, they want to interview every single boy that Beverly had ever spent time with. Including Daniel Schulte, who claimed to be working during the time of the murder. He passed a polygraph test. Then there was John Pallion, who was a neighbor who everybody knew was secretly in love with Beverly. He said he was home alone during the murders, and when he took the polygraph test, it was inconclusive. Then there was Bruce Bylick, the neighbor and college student who lived on the road behind Beverly's home, who wanted to see her naked. He was working on his car when the murder happened, and his parents corroborated that story.
Right.
He never had to take a polygraph test. But then there was this guy named Harry Maydall. Harry was a 17-year-old door-to-door salesman who would go on to stab a pregnant woman named Gerda Leedy in January of 1965, so just a few weeks after Beverly's murder.
Right.
He's an encyclopedia salesman. He goes door to door.
Yeah.
And a neighbor heard a commotion, and she's the one who actually stopped him from killing this woman. He had a checkered past with bad behavior. He robbed a house at 9. He raped his stepmother at the age of 16, and he threatened to kill and murder his half-siblings. So the police bring him in for the other stabbing, this pregnant woman, who does, by the way, survive, and so does her baby. And they get him to confess to the murder of Beverly. But then he recants it. And the knife he used was the wrong kind of knife when he stabbed the pregnant woman. It's not the same knife that Beverly was stabbed with. Okay. And when they make him give his version of Beverly's murder, he's way off, way off. Still, when they pick him up in January of 1965, he had 3 healing cuts, 2 on his face and 1 on his wrist. Now, this kid had actually worked at one time at a department store that Beverly used to go to a lot. So he could have noticed her there, and he did live nearby. He submitted to 4, count 'em, 4 polygraph tests, and they were all inconclusive. But the polygraph test person, the scientist who conducted the test, said that his responses were so erratic and very irresponsible. He cried through all the polygraphs, and his fingerprints were also inconclusive. He couldn't have been the stalker. They discover he couldn't have been the stalker because when the calls were coming in, he wasn't even living in Ohio. Oh. So it doesn't really it doesn't add up a whole lot.
Sure.
The details he gave leading up to Beverly's murder just didn't match the crime, and the knife he used to stab Gerda Leedy was way smaller than the one in Bev's murder. He's never charged, and after he clears all this up, apparently, he moves to Germany. This is right after World War II. Wow. He moves to Germany.
He was looking for a fixer-upper.
Apparently. Then, of course, the last person to see her alive, not to speak with her, is James Mondalazowski. Sorry, James. The son of Beverly's grandmother's neighbor.
Yeah.
And he said the trip to her house lasted 15 minutes, and he went home after and ate lunch, and police ruled him out pretty fast. There was also Gary, the friend of Barbara's, who picked her up at the gas station. He's questioned, but he's never given a polygraph test. There was Stanley, Barbara's cousin, who Beverly dated once. He was a troubled youth. Word was that he was hung up on Beverly, but he was interviewed and also cleared by the police. And then there was her stalker, the whole reason she was always so worried. 3 months before the murders, the phone would ring over and over again. They would call, hang up, sometimes 10 or 12 times a day.
Jeez.
And what police know for sure is that the killer would have been covered in Beverly's blood and possibly plaster from the wall that she kicked a hole in. Mm. And how in the world did her killer leave the scene without being seen?
Yeah.
I mean, a woman sees these girls leave at 10:30 in the morning because she sat over a canary, but nobody sees a man covered in blood walking out the back of their house, which nobody ever, out a door no one uses.
Right.
I mean, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
And these houses are really close together, so I just don't get it. The phone call from Stephen Stankiewicz, well, they believe that was the killer checking to see if Beverly was home alone. There were Stankiewiczes in the area, but the only Steve had moved away a year before the murders.
Wow.
Now, handwriting experts said that the message that she took down was written under heavy pressure and anxiety. I don't know how you see that. I've seen the message. I'll post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws. She has gorgeous penmanship. That's what I noticed about it. She had beautiful script handwriting, something that kids I don't even think they're taught how to write in script anymore.
The only time I write when I'm anxious or under pressure is with a crayon. Sorry, I had to lighten this up a little bit.
You write everything in capital letters in print, and then you sign your name in script.
Yeah.
And I have I'm very much a cursive person.
A lot of that comes from, when you're writing music, you have notation, but when you're putting in lyrics, you put them in cap letters.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just thought that was, you were shouting at me all the time when you were leaving me notes, honey.
No. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. I'll be back in a second.
No, I know. I'm the only one who leaves actual notes. Everybody just texts each other in our family, and I'm still old school. I'll leave a little note in the kitchen or something.
I know when you want me to pick something up like at Sam's or the grocery store, you're like, let me write this. I'm like, no, just text it to me.
Yeah, I'm like, let me give you a list on a piece of paper because that's what I do when I go to the grocery. And he's like, no,
I guarantee I will lose that. By the time I get to the grocery store, it'll be gone.
And then there's me walking through the grocery store with a pen tucked behind her ear. Yeah. I'm like taking everything down. Right.
And yet we digress.
Detective Horrigan focused his attention on Beverly's boyfriend, Roger McNamara. Roger was home and sick on the day of the murder. He too passed the polygraph. The second time. The first time was inconclusive. And I think he was just too overcome with grief and really never got over what happened to Beverly. After he was cleared, Detective Horrigan would call him every single year to give him an update on the case. He was just crushed. Her boyfriend was just crushed.
I'm sure.
But at this point, the case goes cold. Very, very cold. 7 years after the murder, Ted and Eleanor are still living in the same house where their daughter was murdered. That kind of caught me by surprise. I don't know if I could stay in a house where someone was murdered.
Wow.
Carol is off to college by now. There's a break-in at their home while Ted and Eleanor were at a funeral for a neighbor, and 2 prints that were framed and hanging on a wall were taken down, and the backing was torn out. They were copies of Beverly's 2 favorite paintings. They also stole a gold watch, and no one knows what they were looking for or if what they were looking for they found. But why?
Yeah.
And how?
Weird.
So some of the theories they were thinking, was Beverly changing out of her clothes when the attack occurred? Or did the killer take her out of her clothes? How did she not hear him coming up the stairs if it is a he? There's no forced entry, and she never kept the doors unlocked. So did she let someone in whom she trusted? And what about the anonymous gifts left at the back door? Her little sister Carol said that Beverly did sometimes wear the ring that was left there for her. So did she maybe know who they were from? Beverly was also known to keep a lot of her thoughts to herself, and she wrote everything she was thinking and feeling in her diary. The one thing that the killer took with him after he killed her.
Right.
And this police officer, the guy in charge of everything, even after he retired, he checked out any leads that came in on the case until he died in 2004 at the age of 93.
Wow.
He was 93, Captain Horrigan, 93, still looking for Beverly's killer.
Wow. And he went to his grave not completing that.
I will say he did say that he believed he knew who murdered Beverly, but he didn't have enough evidence.
Really?
And he took that to the grave, too.
Wow.
Now, Beverly's parents will eventually divorce. Ted will die in 2012. Her mother, Eleanor, will die in 2018. As for her little sister, Carol says Beverly's murder deeply affected her personality for a really long time. Quote, I was always like a real outgoing person. I had lots of friends and everything. And when this happened, I just feel like I got to be an introvert, end quote. Carol remembers she and her parents were questioned by police and recalls getting asked questions about who Beverly hung out with at school and in the neighborhood. Now, there was another murder that many people linked to Beverly's that happened 6 months prior to her murder. 15-year-old Jessica Minter was found stabbed to death in the living room of her home in Lawrenceville, Ohio. She was attacked during daylight hours, just like Beverly, and there was no weapon found and no forced entry into the home. And this case remains unsolved. But so does Beverly's, 61 years later.
Wow.
And Lawrenceville is only 108 miles from Garfield Heights. So there's only 108 miles between these two towns. So could it be the same person? It could be.
Yeah.
This brings me to a YouTube I watched. There is a private Facebook group called The Legacy of Beverly Jarosz, and there are a couple of amateur sleuths who have some theories about Beverly's killer. I will have a link to it in the show notes.
All right.
But to sum it up quickly, one of them hears a podcast about Beverly years ago, and on this podcast, after they tell Beverly's story, they have a psychic. Like sometimes we have Catherine Kaufman, our psychic. They have a psychic tell them what she sees about this unsolved case.
Okay.
And she sees the name Tom and the number 99. Now, the police have also had their own psychic come to the house, come to Beverly's home, who said that the killer is still alive and that Beverly's father, Ted's spirit, still walks the house. But nothing inconclusive, everything inconclusive about Beverly herself.
Right.
But these two amateur sleuths, they seem to believe that there was a fireman, and there is a fire station that did back up to the Jarosz's house. And this person's address, this fireman's address, listed with the fire department in 1964, he actually has two addresses. One is right near Beverly's home, and the other is an apartment that overlooked where Beverly went to school, the yard where the girls would hang out at school.
Okay.
And both locations, this person could have watched or stalked Beverly very easily.
All right.
And these two true crime sleuths have made phone calls to people locally in that area trying to get more information. And they've been met with, according to them, some pretty rude comments like, get a life, or I'm not talking about that.
Really?
Kind of thing.
Wow.
And I'm paraphrasing all of that, so you can go and watch their YouTubes.
Yeah.
According to their 3-part documentary on YouTube, there were people who believed, or there were rumors, that a fireman was the killer. And the person they believed or want investigated further has actually passed away. He died in 2005. And again, according to the documentary, he's buried just a few paces away from Beverly.
Really?
Now, there were other murders in Ohio in the suburbs around the time that Beverly was killed. But 61 years later, this case remains unsolved. But according to the Garfield Heights Police Department, quote, Beverly's case remains a top priority and is still aggressively being investigated. Some recent activity has included the following: advanced MVAC DNA testing on key pieces of evidence, which has resulted in newly discovered DNA, interviews of witnesses, and surveillance, end quote.
Okay.
But this happened, 60 and a half years ago. It'll be 61 years in December.
Yeah.
Most of these people who would remember anything are gone.
Sure.
Now, I know the legacy of Beverly Jarosz Group has brought their findings to the police, and Detective Mark Menery has said they are in frequent communication with Beverly's sister, Carol, and that there are currently suspects in the case, saying, quote, the advancement in DNA testing has changed the way Beverly's case is now being investigated, end quote. And to quote William Shakespeare, who Beverly loved so much, truth will come to light, murder cannot be hid long. In the end, truth will out. Now, Beverly's sister, Carol Jarosz Bartos, is now 73 years old and is still waiting for answers.
Wow.
And the police department there is still looking for information. So anybody who has any information is asked to contact Detective Mark Menery of the Garfield Heights Police Department at 216-475-5686. And I will post all of that information in the show notes and in the In-Laws and Outlaws. So if you know anything, give them a call. But that is the unsolved murder of Beverly Jarosz. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Okay, well, here's my take on everything. It's just amazing that 61 years later, they still don't have any solid, concrete evidence or any clues.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, that's just, once again, everybody always talks about the perfect crime. This seems like it was the perfect crime.
Yeah, I feel like if this crime took place today, they would be able to find this person so fast.
Yeah.
So fast.
Yeah.
If they would be looking for his hair somewhere on the floor, and
Right.
they would be able to get DNA from that. We're so much better at it now.
Yeah.
But, back then, 1964, 1965, I mean, think about it. This is like a little suburban area where white picket fences. The police department was used to like pulling people over for speeding or...
It's like where I grew up.
Yeah, getting after kids for being on Lover's Lane. They were not used to showing up to a house with a 16-year-old girl being stabbed 42 times, blood everywhere, cast off everywhere. You could see that she had put up a huge fight for her own life. Yeah. And I think that's why so many of those police officers they were scarred from this case. It was the worst case they ever had.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's try to lighten things up with a little Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling Sit Ubu. A Florida man bizarrely dressed in a Dalmatian onesie bolted during a traffic stop after being handcuffed on one wrist.
He's okay. I got to get a picture here. He's pulled over. He's wearing a Dalmatian onesie. They try to handcuff him and he runs off before they can get the other cuff on.
Yes.
Okay.
The Florida Highway Patrol, which I'll call the FHP from this point forward.
Okay.
We're in hot pursuit of 36-year-old Keith Devereaux for nearly a day after they attempted to pull him over for reckless driving just after midnight on January 27th. Devereaux had allegedly been driving erratically, stopping and pulling away at high speeds while dropping off a passenger, according to the FHP.
Okay.
He pulled himself from the wreckage. He actually wiped out. He pulled himself from the wreckage and tried to keep running. A video posted the FHP shows. He was quickly tased by pursuing officers, per the criminal probable cause affidavit obtained by KEPR TV.
Okay.
Okay, I just had to get through all that stuff because that's like detail that I really don't care about, but it's important to the thing. Okay, despite being shocked, all right, Devereaux picked a fight with the trooper and began to push and thrash against him before once again attempting to take off. I mean, this dog wanted to run.
Yeah, and he's wearing a Dalmatian onesie doing this.
Yes.
Okay.
Once again, that's why this dog wanted to run.
Okay.
Somehow, he successfully fled. By this point, his truck was wrecked. He had been tased by the troopers, and he still had one wrist handcuffed. This guy's brutal. And yet, he went straight to his girlfriend's home, the one place where authorities were almost guaranteed to check first. The troopers watched him flee through the forest while they waited for backup. A canine unit that could pick up Devereaux's scent, which I thought was really ironic. The real dog took off after Devereaux and turned up at his girlfriend's home. His girlfriend was home at the time and told troopers that she didn't want anyone to go inside, including Devereaux, because they had drugs inside and she didn't want to face jail time.
Oh, my gosh.
It just keeps getting better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Troopers turned tail and filed an arrest warrant so the police could return to the home the following day. When police arrived, they detained Devereaux and booked him for reckless driving, fleeing assault of law enforcement, resisting with violence, and, as his girlfriend had alluded to the night before, possession of what? Methamphetamine, among other charges.
Okay, so they came there. They didn't have a search warrant. Mm-hmm. They came back the next day, and they were still there? Yes. And the drugs were still there?
Well, you gotta put this all in context. Here's a guy that was in a Dalmatian onesie.
Yeah, I get it. But
we're not talking Mensa candidates
no,
here.
But the stupidity level is off the charts, man.
Well, bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
And her heart, too. All right. Number two. Well, he stepped in it this time.
Okay.
Brian Harold, 20, committed a string of nighttime crimes in the residential area of Carlisle, that's over in the UK, with an older accomplice. A dog poo footprint found on a windowsill was matched to the footwear worn by Harold on the night in question.
Okay.
Harold admitted the attempted burglary, 3 counts of theft, and 3 offenses of vehicle interference, and received an 18-month community order. Harold, then aged 19, was sentenced for offenses including the attempted burglary of a family's house at Kirkstead Close, I guess that's the neighborhood, in Bellevue area. On the morning of the 27th of August, a husband and a wife noticed their shed door was open. Prosecutor Jared Rogerson said they had found a garden chair positioned under their windowsill. Mr. Rogerson added, she also noticed there was an amount of dog feces around the exterior of the property. On the windowsill, there was a footprint in that dog feces, which police subsequently examined and found it to be a match to the footwear worn by Mr. Harold.
There you go. That's some sleuthing right there.
Yeah, important safety tip. If you're going to rob a house, make
Don't
sure
step in dog do.
Yeah, watch where you're stepping. All right, this number 3, I titled it, but because of what we just talked about, it seems kind of weird to say it, but I'm still going to say it.
Okay.
Number 3 is Dear Diary.
Oh, there you go.
A Minnesota delivery driver was busted for auto theft because she wrote in her diary that she, quote, totally stole a car today, unquote, according to police. Vanessa Guerra, 30, of Mankato, penned the brain-dead confessional on August 12th, the same day a van was swiped and resold for parts nearby, according to a criminal complaint filed November 22nd.
She stole a whole van.
Yeah, go big or go home. During the investigation, an officer allegedly found Guerra's journal, which blabs about the vehicle heist in a tone fit for a ladies' brunch. Quote, totally stole a car today, something I thought I'd never do.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Garrett allegedly wrote in the entry according to the Brown County Sheriff's Office. Effing super freaking out about it, she said. Guerra, who recently worked as a DoorDash driver, allegedly sold the 2004
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the 2004 Ford Freestar van for $2,000 at a scrap salvage yard, according to the Smoking Gun, which was first to report the bizarre bust.
Okay.
Workers at the auto salvage business told cops they recognized Guerra as the person who sold them the stolen ride, according to police. When contacted by the investigator, Guerra denied knowing that the vehicle was stolen, according to Mankato, the Free Press.
Of course she did.
Of course she did. And, of course, she was busted.
Bless her heart. I don't know how she got $2,000 out of anybody, but
I don't know how any of them.
Bless all their hearts.
I know these were long, but they were just ridiculous.
It's just a menagerie of hearts that need blessing this week.
It's crazy.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody whose heart needs blessing like these people, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime. I know I'm blow through that stuff so fast at the end.
Yep.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.